Welcome to the Columbus Metropolitan Club. The CMC connects people and ideas through community conversations at forums just like this one every week. I'm Tony Bell, the CEO and Chief Learning Officer of Phoenix Consulting Company. I am also a proud member of the CMC Board of Trustees. For those of you joining us by live stream, we're coming to you live from the Ellis, right here in historic Italian Village. Welcome, welcome everyone. Give yourselves a round of applause. We would sincerely like to thank today's forum sponsors, the Crane Group, the McKinsey Institute for Economic Mobility, and the Robert Weiler Company. Thank you to the presenting sponsor of our live stream, the Center for Human Kindness at the Columbus Foundation. Our promotional live stream partner, the Columbus Dispatch, and the Ellis for hosting. Every CMC takes a village. It takes a village to raise a child, it takes a village to be a villager, and it takes a village to put on the CMC Live each and every week. So let's thank everyone for supporting today's programming. So the question today is, can Central Ohio's prosperity truly become inclusive? Can it truly become a more giving Franklin County so that families have an economic stake in our region's growth? That is the topic of our forum today. So you know me, I've got to sing a little something. Who gets to move it on up? Move it on up. We hope it's everybody, but we're going to learn about that today. So who gets to move up? Rethinking economic mobility in Central Ohio. To help us, Columbus, rethink this critical question, it is my great, great honor to welcome today's panel of leaders. Are you ready? And you feel free to clap every time you hear a name. Let's just keep the energy going in the room because we've got work to do, people. So let us first welcome Dwayne Pinder, partner with McKinsey Company. Lourdes Barroso de Padilla, from Columbus City Council member. Dr. Jason Reese, Associate Professor of City and Regional Planning at The Ohio State's Knowlton School of Architecture. Mr. Keith Jones, President and CEO of Oakwood Management. And our host, returning to CMC once again, Mo Wright, President and CEO of Rama Consulting Group. To kick off today's conversation, because as we're moving on up, we need to kick something off, I would like to welcome the Dwayne Pinder to help us set the stage for today's conversation. Dwayne, the audience is yours and you're ready to captivate. Do your thing, man.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Tony, and thank you to the members of CMC and for all of you for joining us today for what should be a robust discussion. My name is Dwayne Pinder. I'm a partner with McKinsey Company. I'm the founder of McKinsey in Columbus, and I'm one of the founders of the McKinsey Institute for Economic Mobility. We founded the McKinsey Institute for Economic Mobility in 2020 with the theory that if we were to increase inclusive growth, increase economic opportunities for the underserved population, that our entire economy, both nationally and globally, would be not just larger, but stronger. So I want to set the stage with some of our research from our institute. So in 2024, we did a research report called The State of Black Residents, and we looked at economic and social well-being across 8 different dimensions linked to economic mobility. Things like education, things like health, things like housing, financial stability, job preparedness, economic development. And we looked at those things in all 3,000 counties across the United States. And we asked a few questions in that analysis. The first question is, how are Black residents doing? The second question is, how are black residents doing relative to white residents? And the third question is, how has that relationship between black residents and white residents changed over time? So let me just share some of the findings. I'll start nationally and then I'll go specifically to Columbus. So nationally, what we find is 75% of the 3,000 counties across the United States have improved relative to black outcomes. Things like education, things like housing, things like unemployment and financial stability, those things have improved over the past 10 years. So today, it is better to be a black person in the United States than it was to be a black person 10 years ago. The challenge is, when we look at disparities, the gaps between white residents and black residents, those have effectively not moved. In many cases, and on many metrics, they have moved backwards. So the gaps between white residents and black residents are effectively in the same place. When we look across the United States, we don't find a county where black residents have the same outcomes or better as white residents. There are disparities in every single place in the United States. So what does that mean? We asked the question of how long would it take to close some of those disparities if we held white residents constant to where they are today. And what we find is, at the current pace of change, it would take over 300 years. So let me make that specific to Columbus and the region. We all know that Columbus is one of the fastest growing regions, not just in the Midwest, but in the United States. When you ask the question, what race or ethnic group is driving a majority of that growth, it is the black population. And so the challenge is the disparities between white residents and black residents in Franklin County are some of the worst in the country. Franklin County is in the bottom quartile, the bottom 25% of all counties when it comes to disparities. The challenge is, when you look at the size of the gaps, black residents are doing about half as well as white residents are in Franklin County. What's interesting is, when you look at other places, black residents are doing better in Delaware County and some of the suburbs and exurbs. In fact, if you look at Delaware County, the education level is one of the highest in all of the United States. The challenge with Delaware County is, due to issues of access and income, there is not a lot of black residents that live in those areas. And so when you ask the question, because of the size of the gaps, but also because of the relatively slow pace of progress, how long would it take in Franklin County for the gaps to be closed if you held white residents where they are today? The number is 700 years. And when you look at Delaware County, for instance, while the outcomes are better in Delaware County, the gaps are actually growing rather than shrinking. So if you ask the question, how long would it take to close the gaps in Delaware County, the answer would be infinity. So I wanted to set the stage with that research. I'm excited to welcome Mo to the stage so we can have a really robust discussion about how we can turn these projections into just projections and shift the reality for our region.
Good afternoon. Mo, it's good to see all of my friends here at CMC again. And now, Dwayne, when we talked in advance, you were supposed to come and give a positive message today. I see you missed the memo today, but let's talk about it. We all know folks in this room are doing okay. Columbus is a boom town. Economic mobility for many of the folks in this room and your neighbors is going okay. But when we really get down into it, it takes a lot to thrive as a person of color. It takes a lot to thrive based on where you live, where you grow up, and what the resources you have around you allow you to have access to. And so even though Columbus is winning awards and we're becoming a place that everybody knows, you don't have to say Ohio anymore, you can just say Columbus, and people know what you're talking about. When we start to peel back that layer of what's going on underneath the surface, we have the sobering story that Dwayne just kind of alluded to. The numbers are sobering. Today in Columbus, as he said, it would take 700 years to catch up economically with our white neighbors. That's not just a statistic, it is a verdict on how opportunity is available for everyone in this community. The question we must tackle is, how do we change and how do we step up to really lead around this issue? And we've had a dynamic panel here to kind of unpack this conversation today. Dwayne, I want to start with you we termed today around economic mobility, but I want to break that down because I know folks in my family wouldn't know what economic mobility means. What does it really mean, and what's behind when we talk about the ability to be able to move economically? What are we really talking about?
Yeah, so a few things. Economic mobility effectively is the ability for generations to improve their economic and social standing. So you imagine a family has a set of children. Do their children have a better economic and social standing than their parents? And what we find is a few things. In the United States, it's actually easier to rise the economic ladder in Canada than it is in the United States. The second thing that we find is across races and ethnicities, it's actually more likely that black residents and black children are going to fall in their economic standing versus rise, and that is across income. So even if you look at the highest income black children, they have over a 70% chance of falling versus rising or staying in the same place. So the differences in outcomes are stark, and they really depress our overall ability as a nation and as a society to be able to thrive and to be able to grow.
So Keith, I want to bring you into the conversation because in your work at Oakwood, I imagine the families that are residents are not thinking about it as economic mobility. They're just trying to live and thrive and provide for their communities. What does getting ahead look like for those folks each day, and what's the connection between where they're living and what their opportunities are to move forward?
Well, I think getting ahead looks like what us in this room are here to talk about and what we're doing, right? There are conversations that happen around our kitchen table or that did happen in some of our homes about moving on up, being like the Jeffersons, right? And so our residents are no different than that, right? They want to be in a neighborhood that has great resources, great schools, and great opportunities. And so when we see those residents that are in these neighborhoods that have those resources, you begin to see the entire family just begin to move up in all of those social areas, right? I am part of Family Flourish, and they have a great model that I think that is absolutely outstanding by helping families transition or move from neighborhoods that do not have a lot of resources to higher resource neighborhoods. But the key to it is that they give them the support that they need through financial counseling, mental health counseling, job coaching, the whole 9 yards. And so you're putting them in an environment to where that they can be successful, but you're putting them in a neighborhood that has those resources that will help them flourish throughout their lives, not just the parents, but also the kids. Yeah. Because education becomes, I think, the equalizer, right? And if you put them in a neighborhood where the kids can now get a better education, then now we're talking change generationally.
So Jason, I know you're also involved with Families Flourish. Tell this audience a little bit about what you're doing, and then you've been looking at the data of those families and how they've been moving up. Talk about the outcomes you're seeing when we do exactly what Keith just talked about in terms of changing the environment of families, and is it having an impact?
Yeah. So I've been evaluating the outcomes for Families Flourish since 2018. Learned a tremendous deal about how housing in particular is a pathway to economic mobility. Families in the pilot of program for Families Flourish saw their incomes increase by 58%. So far, as our evaluations are showing with our more recent data, our families that have been in the program now for 2 years, 75% of them have seen substantial income growth. A similar rate of folks have seen substantial credit score improvement, overall just financial health improvement. What underlies that, though, is the stability of healthy housing in a safe neighborhood. What we see with our families is that when they come in, housing instability is a form of trauma, right? They're in a fight or flight kind of response mode. Once they become stabilized, and then we start to hear families say, you know, my stress has dropped tremendously. I couldn't sleep at night because I was worried about eviction. I was worried about the safety of my kids. I was worried because I think the apartment I used to be in was making my child sick on a regular basis. Once we alleviated those stressors, then families were able to really focus in and pursue many of those goals that they had. And they do that with the coaches with Families Flourish. And so families are able to get that certificate that is going to help them get that new career that's going to dramatically increase their income. We see kids are thriving in schools that they're in because those schools have more resources, to be quite candid. And so to understand economic mobility, we also have to understand the stressors that are blocking families to those pathways to opportunity.
Councilwoman Barroso de Padilla, I want to bring you in because this is not just a local issue, and it's going to take a lot more than the nonprofit sector is going to be able to do. We come to this conversation knowing that federal funding for things like housing and healthcare and neighborhood support is shrinking every day, and folks are being stifled by federal policy in Washington. And we're in an era where the federal government is refusing to honor even the obligations already made, let alone making new investments. Is this a case of Washington just being out of touch with the needs of folks, or are we intentionally trying to undermine the American dream for some groups or families in our community?
Thanks for the very easy question, Mo. I appreciate after all these years of friendship, you just
I love you so
softballed
much.
that question over to me. Look, I think there's a couple things. I think that in Columbus, way before whoever was leading the country, we decided who we wanted to be as a community. As a Columbus kid who was born and raised here and grew up here, I grew up understanding and knowing there was a tale of two Columbuses, right? I see people nodding and shaking their heads. There was like the haves and the have-nots, right? There were people who were further away from opportunities, right? Immigrant kids like me, the kids that I grew up with in my neighborhood, people that look like a lot of the folks who are in this room today, who are on this panel today. And so we made choices to ensure that we were reaching the people who were furthest away from justice, right? If you look at the policies around housing, that we made sure that we were standing on the side of tenants and making it so that tenants felt better protected, that we doubled down on our efforts for housing, that we started a fund for Black and brown families who were purchasing houses for the very first time with the Maud Hill Fund, that we put in a policy to help to narrow the pay gap for women, because we know since the 70s the pay gap for women has only closed, that's my lifetime, by the way, that's a whole Lord-ass lifetime, by 25 cents. So if you are a Black or a Latina woman, we stand to lose over $1 million over the course of our lifetime. $1 million. It's like an invisible tax that could be put towards housing, that could be put towards tuition, that continues to be placed on the backs of women who, by the way, are the best CEOs because we run small businesses. It's called our houses, and it's work that we don't get paid for. Not only do we take care of our kids, we take care of our parents, we take care of our soccer teams, we take care of our church families. And so when we put in policies like that, we already said what our values were as a community, and that's not going to change. Do I think that Washington is out of touch? I don't think I need to answer that question in this room, right? What we are experiencing right now is modern day censorship. If it makes you feel uncomfortable that I use certain words, I'll use different words. Because there's an economic value to ensuring that every single person in this room has safe and affordable housing, that you are gainfully employed, that your children have an opportunity, not just at a traditional education at a 4-year school, but go to that trade school. Go make that money, because have you guys seen how much a plumber makes? Because I know how much I pay ours. Right? So that is a pathway to the middle class, and it always has been. And so we need to be giving our kids more of those opportunities. That's why we started the Columbus Promise, to give a pathway so that kids like me, who were going to be first-generation college students, had a path. And that when my parents sat down and said, girl, we ain't got this money, I was like, I bet I can find it. I bet I can find it. That's why I served 2 years with AmeriCorps. So to answer your question, I think that we have shown and proven our values, and we are never going to move away from that. Does the strategy change? Does the language change? Maybe. Does the goal? Absolutely not.
Very good. And so, Dwayne, for those of us in the private sector, we cannot expect government and the nonprofit sector to do this alone. What is the data, or perhaps even your own thoughts about the role of the private sector in ensuring that there's economic opportunity and prosperity for all existing beyond just providing a job that many folks may not be trained to do. But what are the other strategies the private sector needs to employ to really help to move this needle?
Yeah, so I don't want to understate the importance of a job. There's research that comes out of Harvard and Princeton, organization called Opportunity Insights, which basically looked at different neighborhoods and where were the opportunities actually improving versus decreasing. And what they found were the neighborhoods where opportunity was increasing, you had a majority and a significant percentage of the families, it didn't have to be just the individual parents, but the families who had gainful employment, right? So just having a job matters a ton relative to your ability to afford your home, your ability to provide safety and stability to your family, your ability to contribute to the broader neighborhood and society. And so I think the first thing I would say that the private sector can do is ensure that as many people as possible are employed. I think transparently, many private sector leaders focus on things outside of their lane. They are focused on things that don't have as much impact as actually making sure that people are employed. So when I talk to business leaders across the country, that's the first thing I say is, what are you doing to actually create employment opportunities in the specific neighborhoods? The second thing I would say is, let's look at your products and services. Before we look at your philanthropy, which usually is cents on the dollar, let's look at your products and services where you're spending a majority of your time, effort, and budget. What we have often seen is that there are some financial institutions that have invested a significant amount in some social sector and human services organizations that are in their business, denying Black folks loans, or asking additional questions to folks who are trying to create a small business. So how do you actually change your business practices? How do you shape your products and services in a way that they're actually tailored and specific? What we found is that a significant amount of Black Americans are living in food deserts, for instance. So before I talk to a consumer company about their philanthropy, I want to know what they're doing to actually decrease the amount of food deserts and increase the quality and availability of food in specific neighborhoods. So I think there's a lot that the private sector could do just by running their business better and more thoughtfully outside of just doing traditional philanthropy.
Absolutely.
One other thing I want to add is I think that, I came from the nonprofit sector, still work in the nonprofit sector, and when I think about the investments that companies make, I think a key investment where I think that sometimes there's a bit of a misalignment is around education, because it only behooves the business community to invest in education because that is your workforce. Right? If you're not ensuring that our public schools are funded fairly, that they have the resources that they need, and that you're also approaching them not with hey, I'm a financial institution, so you should go run a financial literacy program, but that's not what the school needs, then are you really moving the needle? Right? And so I think that to the point that you're making, I think it's about having those honest conversations to say, yes, business community, invest in Columbus City Schools, but these are the most meaningful ways that you're going to invest. I mean, investing in the Columbus province, if it was not for the business community, we wouldn't have it, right? It was because they understood that they needed to make that investment to ensure that they had a skilled workforce. Like, this is all interconnected. One thing does not work without the other.
And so you brought up new ideas, like Columbus Promise, and you also brought up education. Keith and Jason, because you all are on the front lines in many ways with some of the work you're doing, we talk a lot about education, a lot about the need for housing solutions, but are we bold enough? Are we doing the things that will really move the needle in a real way to make sure that as a community we can scale and give economic prosperity to folks and not just save a few folks that we plucked out downstream? Thoughts about the boldness of our initiatives and needs to do things differently or bigger?
Well, I think we can always do more, Mo. But we at Oakwood, we are always trying to partner with nonprofits, and we are always trying to partner with initiatives that are doing things to kind of close that gap, right? And so, but is there always an opportunity? Of course there is. But if I can say this, there's also another partner, I think, besides corporate America that needs to be a part of this solution. And that is, I think, the family, the Black family, right? We are talking about the disparity between Blacks and whites. Well, the wealth gap between black and white, while large, is even larger between blacks and, let's say, Asians, who are the #1 wealthiest demographic. So we have to ask ourselves, what are these particular communities doing that we're not doing? And one of the things that stand out to me that I think is a direct correlation to generational wealth is the fact that we have 69.7% of our children are in homes that are by single parents. And we don't talk about that. Conversely, in the Asian community, 11.2% of their homes are single parents. And so when we're trying to close that 300-year gap, 700-year gap, I think it would be a lot easier if we start having conversations as to how to have homes where kids are a part, that healthy homes where kids are a part of, where perhaps there might be 2 incomes, or perhaps there might be a breadwinner and a homemaker that can focus on, help the kids focus on education, however it may be. But I think we cannot overlook the disparity between what happens in the home and generating wealth on a generational scale. It's every solution that we can come up here, I consider downstream. The upstream solution starts in the home.
You talk about, that's good, that's good. This notion of strengthening the family as a core to your economic base is important. Jason, I'm wondering if in your work, are you seeing that correlation, and where does the psychological factors come in, right? If I am a person of color, perhaps I am a single mom, have been in a relationship that wasn't so positive, those factors, how do they play out into what I'm doing, how I'm able to hold down employment, how I navigate my space? Is there the burden, is what in some circles we call it the black tax in some cases. How is that playing out in terms of the families you're seeing and how they're able to latch on to opportunity?
Yeah, I think voices of the families that we talk to consistently talk about the challenge of being a single parent within a system that is not supportive of single parents. When we talk to a lot of our families and our parents, they're under a tremendous amount of stress. They're working excessive numbers of hours. They're trying to put their kids in opportunities where they can excel, succeed. A lot of our parents are very isolated and alone. They don't feel like they have the social support that they need. One aspect of Families Flourish, which I think is really critical, is not only the life coaching, which brings a life coach in to help that family and that parent, pursue their goals, think about how they want to plan for the future, but it's also the support within the community of families. Families get together monthly, they build relationships with each other, and we'll hear parents say, I didn't know there were other people in the same situation as me. I felt ashamed, or I felt stigma around that. Now I'm recognizing this is a bigger issue. And they find support within each other. So certainly there is a psychological aspect to this where families are stressed, tired, and they are feeling that stigma.
Can I just make a few points, given this conversation about the family and how it relates to economic mobility? I just want to highlight 3 things. One is history, the second is systems, and the third is motivation. So on history, when we look at the analysis of specific neighborhoods that are underserved and have a significant lack of economic mobility, there is almost a 1-to-1 correlation with historically red line neighborhoods, right? I think we just have to be able to look at the differences in how systems, policies, and history have impacted different groups differentially, when we look at some of the current gaps. The second thing I'd say is on systems, Michelle Alexander did an analysis of what has actually happened to black men and and how has that led to differences in marriageable men, for instance. What she finds is many of the marriageable men were incarcerated. And so we cannot think about the challenges in the family structure without thinking about how certain systems and policies have impacted that family structure. And the third thing I'd say is motivation. Typically when folks look at some of these disparities, they think that there's a difference in motivation. And what we actually find is, if you just look at education, where I spend a lot of my time, we did an analysis and we found that many colleges, universities, almost 95% of R1 institutions, the largest, most well-endowed institutions, are underrepresented when it comes to Black and Latino populations. And then you ask the question, well, is that because of motivation? And what we actually find is, if you ask Black and Latino parents, what do you desire for your kids? More often than not, those Black and Latino parents are saying, I want a good education, more than the average, more than white parents. So actually, from a motivation perspective, Black and Latino parents want better for their kids, but from a systems and access perspective, they're not given those things. And so I think, so we just have to talk about these things holistically, and I think there's a lot more opportunity if we address, systems and access relative to motivation.
And so, Councilwoman, I want to get you in here because there is a lot of noise in the environment right now. I mean, every day there's a new executive something at the federal level, and then we bring it down to the state house and locally. I'm just wondering if you have thoughts about policy we ought to be thinking about, keeping our eye on, things we ought to be supportive of. All of us at least have a vote, if nothing else, in this community. And so where should we be more engaged in issues that might not be top of mind for us, but might have long-term implications for how we continue to, one, just hold the ground, and then obviously make some progress where possible?
Sure, and I want to make one point to the conversation that we were having. I think that a lot of times when we're thinking about people in our community who are struggling, we're thinking about folks who might be way over here, right? You're working 2 jobs, but I want to be clear that, just the other day we were having a conversation with a young woman who was a single mom, college graduate, and she cannot make ends meet, right? Because as Shirley Chisholm said, the rent is too damn high, and I would amend that so is childcare. And so when she is making decisions, right, so she has to hold down, she has to find a good job, she has to get to that good job, she has to find a nice place to live, and she has to find childcare for not 1, but 2 children, right? And so how do you make that money stretch? So even to the point that you're making, even when we are meeting what our parents, what our ancestors' wildest dreams were for us, it's still not enough. Right? Because when the cost of everything else is going up, then we have to make tough decisions. If you have to decide between a whole car and a whole house, which one are you going to choose, right? And so that's why meeting people where they are, you can't talk about housing without transportation. That's why we had efforts like Zone In. That's why we have efforts like Link Us, which all of you were investors in, because you said as a community, you needed it and we wanted it and we had to have it for our residents. So I think to the point that you're making, I think everything matters. And that's hard. That's a hard answer, right? But I want folks to be aware of this. A lot of times people will come down to city council, right? They'll come to city council on a Monday night, and we're the hottest ticket in town, right? Because number one, you have a captive audience and you have a TV camera. You know where the real hot ticket is? It is 5 minutes away from City Hall. It's called the State House. Because I want to be very clear that the policies that come out of the State House, while certainly what happens in the city of Columbus affects what you see when you look out your window, but what you feel every day comes from that State House. And there are a lot of times that people will come to us, and I have to give me and my colleagues, I see Otto Beatty here, I see Nick Bankston here, many times me and my colleagues have to give the most dissatisfying answer that says that is actually not in our purview, and how much I wish that it was. But it's not, because that's a decision made by the State House. Oftentimes we will come up with a policy, and as soon as they see the policy that we are creating, they override our policy because it does not meet their agenda. And so many times there will be a hearing about something that's happening at the State House, and unless there is an organized group, you know who's there? 0. 0 people. And something passes very quietly, and then y'all see it on the news, and then you're mad. And I don't say that to be accusatory, because who has time? I don't even have time to keep up with these executive orders, much less what's happening at the State House. But I think that it's imperative for us, just the same way that I'm accessible here, so is Dontavius Gerald, so is Herschel Craig, so is Meredith Lawson Rowe, so is Munira Abdumali. All of the folks who represent you are just as accessible. And it's important that we start to have a better conversation with folks about the things that are happening there, because every day there are policies that are being pushed forth that are affecting our children, that are affecting our livelihoods, that are affecting our personal safety, that are attacking our identities, and we don't even see it until it's too late. Yeah. And once something is done, it's hard to undo. So I would say we're going to continue, because we have this conversation already, right? Folks know how to access us, but how we access them is a better conversation for us to have.
So, yeah, very good, very good. It's not just Columbus. As you know, it is CMC's long-standing tradition to take audience questions, so in just a minute, I'll be moving to questions from both the live stream and the in-person audience. If you have a question, please go ahead and make your way toward the mic. Doug is standing in the back of the room. He'll be happy to get you ready for that. If you're joining via YouTube, please go ahead and type your question to the chat, and Doug will help to facilitate those in just a moment. To the panel, one final question from me, and I guess this is more of an aspirational question. That 700 years or 300 years, it doesn't matter, beyond all of our lifetimes, I guess the question would be, let's make you king or queen for a day, and that is very dangerous in this environment, but let's just hypothesize with me for a moment. What is the one thing that you would change or continue to ensure that economic prosperity is still available, to help people move up, to move out, to move forward, that could be shared by every resident? What's the one thing you would really, I give you magic wand, I give you wheel and the resources to do it. What's the big change we need to make in order to see that parity that we're talking about and we're looking for? Dwayne, we can start with you real quick.
So I would say let's have a strategic, consistent, scaled approach to underserved neighborhoods in Columbus. So there are 5 to 7 neighborhoods in the region that are historically and chronically underserved. They are being served by a smattering of different social and economic programs, and there is no coordination or strategy behind how to serve each of those individuals in that neighborhood. So if we had a coordinated public sector, private sector, and social sector focused on how do we increase outcomes in those 5 to 7 neighborhoods that doesn't start and then end in 5 years, but actually is consistent, and we are held accountable to it over time, I think we'd make significant progress.
My first order of business, I'm going to say on brand, raise the minimum wage and pay people what they're worth, period.
I think I would create groups for African Americans to come together and pool their resources. I was reading an excerpt or a study that the Woodson Institute did about a story from 1929 in Chicago, Illinois, where 700 families came together. They pooled their resources through their churches and other things, and they had few tenets that was paramount. And one of the tenets, and I keep going back to this, was they were going to focus on the family. And so these 700 families pulled their resources together when they were denied access to capital to start businesses. And it was living in neighborhoods where they were redlined, but they were able to amass over $700 million in real estate assets because they came together. And so I think that if I was king for a day, I would create groups for us to come together, have conversations about hard topics, pool our resources together, and we will begin to have economic mobility together.
I think scaling up many of the things that we are doing that are working, right? We know the solutions that work. We know healthy neighborhood environments and schools with resources and kids, and making sure kids have stable housing that's affordable. Those kids are going to thrive. We know this. So again, that's the goal we should be focused on, and there's a number of different solutions to get us there. We need both concerted efforts at the neighborhood scale, as was referenced earlier, but we need economic mobility programs like Families Flourish to serve families in the moment, right? Because to turn around a neighborhood that has been disinvested in for 30 or 40 years is going to take 10 or 20 years. Our families can't wait that long, right? They shouldn't have to wait that long. So we need to create those opportunities now. So particularly for young children who are the most vulnerable to many of these challenges we see in our city and community today, that they have access to the opportunities and resources so that they can thrive. And that should be our guiding light.
Good. Audience questions. Doug?
Mo, thank you very much, and thank you so much to today's panelists for a great conversation. If you have a question for today's panelists, please do join us here at the microphone or type your question in online. We'll try to get to as many as possible. Great questions at CMC are short. They can be asked in just 1 or 2 sentences. And what punctuation mark does a question end with? It ends with a question mark. There was a wrong answer over here. It ends with a question mark. I wanted to mention, too, we will post a link to the McKinsey study, The State of Black Residents, on CMC's website later today. I'm going to launch us off with this one from the live stream audience. Jerry Holton, founder of the Ohio Housing Innovation Partnership, former Undersecretary of the Navy and university president, asked this. One of the mobility problems in Central Ohio is the short supply of middle-income housing that young, upward mobile families would like to live in but can't afford. Other cities are building walkable communities and 15-minute neighborhoods. How do you see Columbus's new zoning law and CODA's transit corridors as being solutions for Columbus?
So, Zone In was our effort to change the 70-year, we had not made changes to our zoning policy in 70 years. We took that strategy and overlaid it on top of the corridors for Link Us for that reason. We know that we are going to become more dense as a city, and we want to grow up and not just out. And so all of that density is driven to those corridors. So you are going to have those amenities right along a corridor. East Main Street, in my neighborhood is going to look very different. You can live there, you can work there, you can play there, you can hop on a bus stop, and you can go down the street and drop off your child at an affordable child care place, and then you can stop at a small business and pick up some groceries for that evening, right, on your way home. That was always our intention, because you can't talk about one without the other. We've doubled down on our housing plan. You saw that at the mayor's State of the City for this reason, to allow for affordability, and affordability today means something very different than it did 5 to 10 years ago. We're talking about my aides at council who today don't have the prospects of buying a house because they can't afford it. And so we want to ensure that there is housing for them, whether they're looking to buy or whether they're looking to rent.
Hello, and thank you for a great conversation. My name is Dr. Pamela Ellis. I'm founder of Compass College Advisory, and I have a question for Dwayne. You had referenced a statistic earlier about 70% of Black students, Black children who are in the upper middle class, wealthier class, that have a 70% chance of actually decreasing in terms of their wealth. And I wanted to ask you more about why you think that's the case for them.
The simple 2-word answer is, or 3-word answer is, race still matters. So we just, I'll just speak personally. I'm the father of 2 girls, and my wife's actually in attendance. And the maternal mortality gap is income blind. And when I say the maternal mortality gap, that means the likelihood that a Black woman dies in childbirth or shortly after childbirth is sometimes 2 times, 3 times, or 4 times as likely, not just in the United States, but in Ohio and in Franklin County. And there are stories about really high-income women like Serena Williams, for instance, who almost died in childbirth because their concerns were not taken seriously. and those concerns not taken seriously has significant consequences that Black women have to face every single day. And so I do not think we can have this conversation without talking about race, which is why our institute focuses on, we have a Black economic mobility pillar, we have a Latino mobility, economic mobility pillar, and we have a rural economic mobility pillar, because race still matters.
Thank you very much. Carol Looper, watching online, asks, how do we encourage two-parent homes?
Well, since I talked about it the most, I guess I will take that.
I feel like I might be biased when I answer this question as the only woman on this panel, but please, sir, go ahead.
Right. My wife's in the audience, too. I think it has to start with a conversation, right? And it has to be an open conversation. And that, in the story that I told that I read from the Woodson Institute, back in 1929, only 10% of kids were in a single-family home. That has ballooned to now 69%. And so I don't think that they were immune to any economic and social problems more so than we are today. And so we just have to have candid conversations to say it's okay. And then when there are relationships are hard. Work through your problems and seek counseling and seek mentors to help guide you through these pitfalls that would cause a single-family home, because I guarantee you that the problems that happen, there's nothing new under the sun. Someone else has the answer.
I just want to add one quick thing. I think that I'm the mother of 2 daughters, and my girls are teenagers, and we need to listen to this generation because they are different, y'all. And what they want is different than what we wanted or what we want for them. And I think that a lot of times we're like, this is the best way because this is the way we were taught and this is the way it's always been. And they're like, but wait a minute, there could be a different way. There might be a different path. And so I think that we need to listen. We need to listen to our young people. We need to listen to the things that they need, the things that they're asking for, and then we need to find a way in the middle, right? Because I think that many times we're not looking at that. And so sometimes we're trying to address a problem over here, and we're all wrong. We're way off base. We're hitting over here, and they're way over here. So I would just say yes and, that I think that generations after us, because the world is different, and the opportunities for them are different, and the opportunities for women are different. And I think that's something that we cannot dismiss.
Thank you all for the conversation. Nick Bankston, Columbus resident. My question is one of an observation of this room and looking at the diversity that is here. I think this is probably the most brown folks I've seen at a CMC. But the question is, how do we have these conversations, particularly in this political climate, with the folks who actually need to hear this? And how do we, two parts to that question, how do we structure this in a way that it doesn't personalize? And understanding that these are systems. And so the question for you all is, again, how do we have these conversations with the folks who need to hear it? And then again, how do we make sure that it's not personalized given the political climate? And then Dwayne, a very pointed question. Is there any correlation in your data around early childhood and economic mobility, meaning investments in pre-K and infant care and all of that? Does that translate to economic mobility, particularly for Black and brown folks who have not had that access? Thank you.
So I'll answer that question first, and I'll come back to the other question. So the answer is yes. Significant relationship between economic mobility and early childhood education. I'll just point out 3 things. One is obviously pre-K and early childhood education matters a ton for the kids who have access to that. We know that there's a 7 times ROI if you invest $1 in pre-K education in terms of the economic and social outcomes that happen for kids. So that's thing number 1. Thing number 2 is it matters for the parents. As a parent of 2 young kids, I need my kids out of the house when I'm working. Participation in the labor market actually increases when you have access to affordable, high-quality childcare. The third thing, and this is particular for the Black population, if you look at who is significant in terms of the teachers and the workforce in early childhood education, it is Black women. And so if we invest in our early childhood education infrastructure, we can therefore increase the overall incomes for the Black and underserved and low-income women who are participating in that part of the economy. So yes, significantly, if I were to have a recipe for increasing economic mobility, affordable housing would be on one hand, early childhood education would be on the other. To the question about folks who are not in this room. So the conversation that I have in rooms that do not look like this about this topic is about economic growth. Many folks are really focused on economic growth. Many folks in Columbus are focused on economic growth. That's what folks talk about. We talk about our population growth when we talk about our economic growth. And if I say our economic growth is at risk, people want to know why. And it is significantly at risk because we have a significant part of the population that is not participating in the economy and not participating in the society as fully as it could be. And if we do not fix that problem, we could see our population growth and our economic growth not just decline, but go away. And so if we want Columbus to continue to be thriving, growing, and one of the places that people talk about as one of the top cities and top regions to be in the United States, we have to grow inclusively, and we have to do so now.
Hello, my name is Danielle Sidnor, the CEO of Rise Together Innovation Institute. We talk often in our organization about the fact that the majority of people in Franklin County that are experiencing poverty are actually white. When we spend a lot of time talking about the disparity, which I think is important, we also miss this big point that the majority of people are white. How do you think, Dwayne, we should be framing this conversation around the fact that we spend a lot of time so people think the only people in the community are poor are Black when the majority are actually white?
Yep. So this is concept that was created called the curb cut effect. And it basically talks about how we designed sidewalks to improve access for those who are disabled and those who are in wheelchairs. So we created, ramps on different sidewalks. And by creating those ramps on different sidewalks, we made it more accessible and easier for folks who were disabled to access the sidewalks. But we didn't just do that. We made it easier for families with kids who have strollers to access the sidewalks. We made it easier for other individuals and populations that had that same problem, but because we were focused and targeted, we actually created a solution that mattered for everybody. That, I think, is the strategy. What you often find when you talk about economic mobility or economic growth is we start with other populations other than the Black population. And I see this in many corporations. They have, a belonging initiative or they have a diversity initiative, and everybody else is benefiting off of those initiatives instead of the Black population. And so I think there's real power to say, let's focus on the most underserved, Black populations, Latino populations. Let's create specific solutions that are going to work for those individuals and families. And what you'll find is that, to Danielle's point, those solutions are going to matter for a bunch of other people who are in the same position. But because we're not specific and targeted, we don't get the full benefit of those solutions.
Thank you so much. We're getting so many questions, great questions online, but unfortunately we're running short on time. We have about 3 minutes left for a final question.
All right, good afternoon. My name is Jay Avery Frost. I serve as President and CEO of Freedom Equity, Inc., as well as Executive Director for the Central Ohio African American Chamber of Commerce. So for me, when I'm thinking about economic mobility, I'm thinking about autonomy, I'm thinking about small businesses, I'm thinking about wealth creation. But to hear the stat that even with all the work that we have been doing, there's still a 700-year gap, quote unquote, if you will. What are some strategies that we can be employing to speed some of this up for people who are alive right now, right? Sincerely, because for us and where we're at, creating and being an entrepreneur and taking your own wealth creation into your own hands is the best thing that you can do when As a black woman, I'm still at, 78 cents or whatever the cent is on the dollar, so I go make my own dollar instead of waiting for your dollar. So what are some strategies that you guys have?
I think, look, I don't think there's a silver bullet to solving the issues that we're talking about. I think every day we chip away at things, we narrow the gap for women, right? We to your point around the pay equity legislation, the salary history ban that we put forward, we knew that it was going to have the greatest impact on women and people of color, but everybody gets paid more, right? Everybody gets paid more because we didn't just say, don't ask black people or Latino people or women this question. We said, don't ask anybody this question, right? And so that certainly is not going to be the thing that solves it, but it's going to narrow it. I think the programs that we have currently, I think about our resident here, Nick Bankston, who also serves on the Columbus City Council, when I think about his small business programs, right, when I think about some of the programs that you have going on, making sure ground floor growth, some of those businesses would have never had access to being in downtown and to reaching the audience that they reach downtown, but because we made it more accessible for them, now you can live your dream, right? Now you can invest. My dad was a small business owner who literally paid our bills out of the till from his store. Now people can be downtown and they can have access to a whole group of folks who want to buy their products that they wouldn't have had before, right? So I think it's all of the strategies that we are doing that are chipping away. Can we be bigger and bolder and make more investments? Yes, and we can get there faster. But then we also have some things. I started with minimum wage because if you're making $10 or $12, how are you going to get ahead? That is like a bag of sand with a hole in it, right? You can put more in, but it still has that hole. We need to plug those holes and think about the ways that we are making the most impact as we continue to make all of these other investments and other strategies that, again, chip away at that 700, 300, 100-year gap that we're all facing.
All right, folks, we're going to have to leave it there. I'm going to welcome back Tony Bell for closing comments.
Everyone, I hope you found today's forum and community conversation sobering. I hope it put you in touch with the tale of two Columbuses. I also hope that you found today's conversation compelling enough for you to want to take a deeper role in closing the gap, right? Because there's many systems involved, and we have the power. We've got the power. And I also hope that this encourages each of you, each of us, to do more, to do more, because we can do more than just keep our heads above water and what? That's right, yeah, making a way when we can, and we can do that one more time. We can do more than just keeping our heads above water. You ready? That's right. All right, because we can have good times. There you go, we can have the good times. So I'd like to thank the sponsors of today's forum, the Crane Group, McKinsey Institute for Economic Mobility, the Robert Weiler Company, and we are also so very grateful to our presenting sponsor of our live stream, the Center for Human Kindness at the Columbus Foundation, and our promotional live stream partner, the Columbus Dispatch. And thank you so much to the Ellis for hosting us. And our very special appreciation goes to today's speakers, in seated order. Partner at the McKinsey Group, Mr. Dwayne Pender. Wise woman, the only female on this panel, Columbus City Council member who's also a wife, a daughter, a sister, a mother, and mother of two teenage daughters, and so much more. Lourdes Barroso de Padilla. Also, the president and CEO of Oakwood Management, Mr. Keith Jones. Associate Professor of the City and Regional Planning at The Ohio State University's School of Architecture, Dr. Jason Reese, who's also a member of family and supporter of Families Flourish, and our host, our very own Mo Wright, CEO of Rama Consulting Group. All right. And I'd like to thank you so much and invite each of you. We've got a wonderful room here today, and for next week, we have our topic, Taxed and Confused, Making Sense of Rising Property Taxes in Ohio. Thank you.